So I think we have a bunch of people on the call now, and I want to introduce Sasha. I stumbled upon her blog about a week ago, and I can't even remember what I was looking for, but I was interviewing Josh Kaufman, who wrote The First 20 Hours, and I was looking for I was looking through reviews of the book, and I came across your visual book review, and I was just like, wow, this is amazing. This is so cool. Sasha, do you think you can pull that up on your
Yep,
screen?
I can totally pull that
Uh,
up on my
um,
screen. Hang on a
yeah,
second, let me put it on
so
screen sharing.
Sasha put together this visual book summary, and I just thought it was so cool. Um, I've always liked drawing stuff out, and recently I've been getting more and more into it. And one of the next courses I'm going to be teaching is on the patterns of geniuses, and one of the geniuses that I think has done a lot of cool stuff is Da Vinci, and
Mm-hmm.
he was part of the Renaissance, and one of the cool things that came about during the Renaissance and made it so special was that people started visualizing information. They started creating graphs and maps and mind maps and diagrams and structuring stuff out, and Bill Gates actually is a book collector and a document collector, and I think he spent at auction something like $31 million for one of the key pages in Da Vinci's notebooks. And Da Vinci had a really, I'm getting kind of off track for the introduction, but Da Vinci would write backwards in mirror type,
Yeah.
and some people thought that it was because he wanted to hide his ideas. Other people thought that, like, I can't remember if he was a lefty or not, if that's why he did it, but like you smear the ink with your hand if you're a lefty.
Yeah.
So anyways, so I'm really interested in that stuff, and I saw this book summary, and I was like, wow, this is like, first of all, she's got great handwriting. I have really bad handwriting, so I can't really share my drawings because the handwriting is so bad. But I started looking through her blog, and she's doing all this different accelerated learning stuff, and I don't know if she really calls it that, but I just started digging through, and I created a profile and blogged about it, and then we said, why don't we do an interview? So so I was talking to Sasha earlier about how she's like a visual genius. I feel like she's a visual
Sure.
genius, and she doesn't like that label. So I was reading through her book, and I thought it would be funny to go through and give you a little listing of all the different things that she's interested in. And I'm sure one of these things is going to stick out to every single person listening to this. So some of the stuff Sasha's interested in is computer programming, open source projects, wearable computing, computer science education, Emacs, personal information management, quantified self, Web 2.0, virtual assistants and outsourcing, Drupal, public speaking, Generation Y, writing, copywriting, sewing, biking, art, piano, theater, chess, photography, event organization, screen printing, calligraphy, typography, system administration, web development, learning Japanese, poi, Diablo, and other street performances, crocheting, singing, gymnastics, yoga, Krav Maga. I was kind of surprised about that one. Trapeze, cooking, ballroom dancing, tango, Renaissance dancing, swing dancing. I've recently gotten into dancing, so we'll talk a little about that. Gardening. I also started gardening this year, and
Yes.
woodworking.
I noticed that you had blueberries planted.
Yeah,
We're starting to pick
they
up a couple now, so this is excellent.
the funny thing about blueberries is they don't, I went to the nursery and I said, how many blueberry plants do I need to make one blueberry pie? And the guy was like, nobody's ever asked me that question. And so what happens is you maybe get like a pint from each plant, but they don't all ripen at the same time. So you actually get like 3 berries ripen per day, and then you're supposed to pick those and like put them in a thing. And I just ended up not even picking them because it was like, I realized I wasn't going to get enough berries to even really do anything with them besides like maybe put it in a bowl of cereal, and I don't eat cereal, so
No, no, no. What you do is, so we have the blueberries planted in our front yard, and what we do
yeah.
is every time we notice there's a ripe one or couple, my husband and I just pick it and pop it into our mouth, and it's a nice, amazing burst of flavor that you don't get in supermarkets. So if you take it as a reflection on a single blueberry at a time, it is
Hmm.
an amazing thing. So
Do
that's
you
how you do
put
it.
netting on top of your blueberries?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we learned this last year. We netted it 2 years ago, and we got blueberries out of it. We didn't net it last year, and the birds got all of them. So now,
Yeah.
even if it makes the front yard less pretty, we have nets. Sorry, yes, tangents. I see you found my list of gazillion interests, and this was in what was that? This was in 2009. So I've picked up quite a few since then.
Yeah. What would you say are the biggest ones that you picked up?
Well, drawing really has emerged as one of those things that a lot of people resonate with. Resonate being a funny word because it's audio, right? But anyway, so people really like the drawing part. Biking has turned out to be lots of fun, so I do that a fair bit as well. I might have mentioned it. I'm not sure. And a lot of the data visualization as well. Now that I have, I've been collecting a couple of years of data in some cases, I actually have stuff to play around with in terms of charts. So this is a constantly evolving list of interests.
Would you say you're more of an audio learner or a visual
No,
learner?
I'm terrible at audio. I used to fall asleep in university lectures to my great embarrassment, and
Yeah.
that and I also still do very badly at the massively online courses. I'm very much skewed towards reading books, just learning through lots and lots of technical manuals and all of that stuff. In fact, I'm much more comfortable reading than listening to a presentation. I always get a little impatient, or listening to audiobooks I get exceedingly impatient unless it's a nonfiction book that's very well read. Sorry, a
Yeah.
fiction
No,
book that's
I
very
agree.
well read.
Well, I want to get into the sketch notes because
Yes.
that's your real signature,
uh,
and I'm
I could,
curious how you originally got into it. How did you get into doing sketch notes, and tell us the quick story of kind of your evolution.
Fortunately, you gave me a heads up, and that's one of the things that you'd likely be interested in. So I have a draft blog post where I put together all the things. This will come out on Friday or thereabouts, and that means I don't have
Okay.
to keep running around for stuff. So the story began in 2007. I actually don't have much of a visual background. I wasn't one of those kids who was always drawing or doodling in class. To my great regret now, because if I had, then I could draw much better than stick figures. But I basically, I worked mostly in text. I was programming, I was reading books. As drawing thing was something that other people did, despite the art classes that my mom signed me up for. Those are fun, but I wasn't really a drawer. And then in 2007, we've been talking about getting Nintendo DS for a while, and since Jessie, who's my stepdaughter, she got a DS, and there were a couple of games that had interesting cooperation modes, and I'd been reading about how people were using DSs to draw, so I got myself one as well, and I loaded
Okay.
it up right away with this application called Coder's DS, which lets you draw using the Nintendo DS's stylus. So it was a lot of fun, and I would draw things like this, just really, rough sketches, sometimes with colors, sometimes I'd use it as a way to relax or remember what I was doing. And since that was fun, I started drawing on paper. Paper is a little bit harder for me to work with because I'm like, well, I can't really erase or do interesting things or work with all these colors. But it was a fascinating
Those
mental
red
challenge.
ones are starting to look pretty good. And what I was I felt like the big evolution in your drawings, or one of the evolutions, came when you went from like drawing the body as a line to like drawing it as a square. For some reason, that really adds like a lot of realism to it.
Yeah, well, there are actually a lot of books that will teach you how to draw stick figures, which is amazing because 5-year-olds get a hang of this just fine. But
Yeah.
you'll see, I tend to flip flop between stick figure drawing styles, and I actually have in my archives a blog post where I tried so many different styles of drawing stick figures to see what I ended up liking the most. I can dig that up later. Anyway, so stick figures, right? I still can't draw anything better than stick figures, but it was fun to imagine stick figures in different situations. And then I started doing presentations with them. Huh, this is actually not the right presentation. I have all my pastes incorrect. So let me dig up that actual presentation. It's a Gen Y guide for Web 2.0 at work. In 2000 and something, one of my friends said, "Hey, we're talking to all these campus students about social business, and they have no idea why Web 2.0 would be very interesting at work." So I made this presentation. I figured, you know what, I have the storyboards. What happens if I turn the storyboards into the presentation themselves? So this is the result. It's a totally rough, hand-drawn, just basic presentation. Look, stick figure with no body. And, it's basically that. And people really, really like this. To my great surprise, it had more than 80,000 views to this date, which is, anyway, so people really like these presentations. And then I started drawing more presentations, and they wanted to know how I made those, so I made a presentation about making presentations by drawing them. And again, very, very simple drawings. And then it turns out that you can get away with sketches and stick figures instead of bullet points, even at a company like IBM. So I started drawing even more presentations. So look, more stick figures. And things like that. So stick figures galore. Eventually, I ended up making I joined this best presentation contest at SlideShare. I made this little,
Hello.
stick figure introduction to who I was and what my website was about, and I did this in the rhyming version.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
uh,
Yes, stick
tell me
figures
what
galore.
it feels like to actually get better at drawing. Like, what does it feel like to go from, I can't, like, even my stick figures look bad, to something that, like, you feel is halfway decent, or people start giving you compliments on it? And
So
are there
it's
any hacks for, like, getting to that level faster?
I could tell you, except I have no idea what it's like to get better at drawing. Because if you look at the drawings that I make now, which is that thing that you have on the screen, they're basically still stick figures. So
Yeah.
I haven't gotten any better at drawing, I think. The main things that are different is that I know my tools better. So, I've learned how to make grids. I've learned how to work with different kinds of brushes. I know how to work with layers, so I can pretend that I can draw.
Did you
And I,
use any
yeah.
tracing? Did you ever trace stuff?
Well, I checked out a whole bunch of drawing books from the library, so all those, yeah, how to draw Disney villains or how to draw hands or whatever else, and they're great. But you know what? When I'm in the middle of trying to write down or capture a conversation, I really just have time to draw very simple images. So
Okay.
the key thing that really helps then is just developing your visual vocabulary. So you might start off knowing, okay, if I need to draw a house, I can draw, a triangle with a square, and every 5-year-old kid can do this. And then you start thinking, well, how do I represent all these other abstract ideas? How do I
Yeah.
represent tools or connecting the dots, or or talking to people or learning? And as you build that vocabulary, that's really just a matter of practice.
Hey, could you pull
Yeah.
up that book we were talking about by that guy, the sketching book?
Oh, it's the Sketchnote Handbook? Yeah, sure.
Um, no, the book. Remember the book I sent you yesterday? One I emailed you. The guy had a bunch of different. I think I sent you the Amazon link to that. Do you remember?
Oh, Ed Emberley. Yeah. How
Yeah.
to draw
Yeah.
everything. Ed Emberley is awesome. He basically says that you can draw a pretty darn wide range of things with very, very simple shapes. A curve, a line, a dot. And if you have stuff like that, there's this make a world thing, which is totally awesome. You can draw things like dragons and steamboats, really just using very, very simple shapes. So here's the cover of that book, right? And
Yeah.
it's you can draw all of these. This is a rectangle with dots in it and circles. And if you can draw that, you can draw everything in his book. He goes through it step by step. So
Okay,
drawing is
so
simple and not scary.
yeah, let's get back to your, can we go back to that post that you're going to do with the evolution of your drawing so we can take it to the next step?
Yeah. So anyway, so the evolution really here is, you know what, you don't need to draw anything super fancy. In fact, I probably won't focus on, learning how to draw hands and faces and figures and all that stuff. You basically just need to build a confidence that you can do it. Because even from my roughest drawings, even from that stick figure the shy connector, for example, this one got really popular as well. This is like really simple drawing stuff, and yet people like it. They resonate with it. So if you start drawing, don't think that you need to have an art degree or a fine arts background or be able to paint the Mona Lisa, because you can't, and I can't. Just give it a try and share, and you'll be surprised what people find awesome.
One of the comments we have in here is John wants to know if you can talk about your semi-retirement and minimalist living and that sort of stuff. But before you answer that, I'm curious, how long does it take to take these visual notes as opposed to normal notes? Because I know a lot of people listening to this are probably going to be thinking, well, you're in semi-retirement, you have all the time, so like you can afford this luxury of doing these fancy drawings, but for us working in the salt mines, we don't have time to, do drawings. So I'm curious, can you talk about like what the time, like how long it takes and if you've gotten faster over time or how you approach the time element?
So sketchnoting, so for example, if I'm doing a live presentation, let me take up some examples here. Category sketch notes. If I'm doing a live presentation, I basically do it right as the person is talking, and then I publish it maybe 5 minutes afterwards. So, for example, CC Chapman gave this interesting talk at Third Tuesday Toronto. He talked for about an hour, which an hour usually translates to 1 page, and by the end of the hour, I had most of this done. I filled in a couple of colors while I was waiting for him to autograph it. Huge line, right? So I, colored it a little bit. Felt like a 6-year-old, but this is good. But basically, it doesn't take any much longer to do this. You just start drawing. You don't have to draw everything. Just like when you're taking notes, you don't have to write down every word, although I try to. And you cover whatever you can cover. So this, I did it, I posted it right away, and then I updated when he signed it. This other thing, like the book reviews. Okay, the book reviews, I tend to read a business book in about 2 hours, and it takes me around, basically while I'm reading it, I'm taking notes. And then as I come across more information, I might move things around a little, but it really doesn't take that much longer. And it's fun.
So one of the issues is like, if you don't know how much information is going to be crammed into that hour, how do you know how dense your drawings should be or what to include and what not to include?
So there's a couple of interesting things here. If you're doing it for a presentation or other live event, then what I find helpful is I draw with a very, very light grid in the background. And I work on my computer, so it's easy for me to just hide the grid when I'm saving it in and publishing it.
And can you talk about, just briefly, can you talk about what computer you use and what application you're using to do these drawings?
Oh, sure. I use Autodesk Sketchbook Pro. And actually, I can show you that. So this is the grid. This is the set of notes that I put together for our chat today. And I have a pen, which you can't see. I can draw directly on the thing. So, for example, I can say, hi. See? Ta-da! So I'm doing this on a Lenovo X220 tablet PC, of which I don't have a picture at the moment, but I can show you a couple of other things that I've put together on that. So it's basically a Windows computer that can convert into a tablet if I spin around the screen, and I draw directly in the screen, which is great because I don't have the hand-eye coordination to do this otherwise.
So it edits natively as a Photoshop file?
Yep. Or a
Okay.
TIFF. So as you can see, I have layers. If I want to move things around, or if I want to erase things, I can just go back in there and hit erase. If I find that you talk a lot, or I talk a lot, or whatever, then I
Yeah.
might take the lasso tool and just move things around to make more space.
Wow.
So that's how it works. See,
And so
right?
this, and then you can import this into Photoshop and make any sort of changes in there also, right?
I hardly ever need to. I usually just make the changes right here. Let's say, for example, if I want to highlight something, that, for example, like you don't have to be an artist. I can take that and I can just change it right here. Let's make that brush size bigger. Change that right here.
Do you keep, one thing I really like doing is printing out stuff, and you like to do that too, but printing out visuals like this, how do you just have a three-ring binder where you keep all your sketch notes and um, all the different stuff that you find on, what's that website you were talking about that has all the good sketch notes on it?
Sketchnote Army? Yeah.
Yeah, Sketchnote Army.
So
So do
that's
you
cool.
print those out? Like, how do you, or do you just put them in, throw them in Evernote and then
Well,
flip
I
through
do
Evernote?
have a collection that I've printed out that I mainly take it along just so I can flip through it at random. But Evernote is super awesome, and I have a blog post about this, also a recorded presentation, because Evernote lets me search inside my sketch notes, which is so cool. So, for example, if I'm looking for science, science, it doesn't get everything perfectly, but when it does, it can find things. So, for example, this one, right? It can find my handwritten text, science, and or whatever, and highlight that. So I really like the fact that these digital tools let me organize my sketch notes that way. And then because I publish a lot of my sketch notes as blog posts, that's another way for me to find things. I do print them out because it's fun to see. It's interesting to look at. But the digital archive is just so much more searchable.
So it seems to me that part of what helps you get better and better is seeing a lot of other artists' work, and kind of like one pattern I noticed is that at a certain, like in the note that you did for our conversation, you put the heading in black and then you put other ideas in like a lighter gray. And so that helps with kind of your brain can process what's more important information, what's not as important.
Yep. Visual
Do you
hierarchy,
have any
yes.
do you have any favorite sketch note artists?
Ah, so uh,
Like
so
top two or
a,
three?
a great resource if you want to be inspired by other people's styles, as long as you don't get intimidated by them, is sketchnotearmy.com. You'll find, people's first sketch notes, or some really amazing ones as well. And then, in addition to browsing through this on a regular basis, I also keep an inspiration file. So this is where I stick, people's awesome sketch notes, or other interesting things like itagami from Japan Foundation, or comics that I really like, or other things that are very expressive. So certainly, whether you're learning about this or you're learning about any other topic, it's great to go out there and look for role models, because then you can say, what is it about this thing? What is it about the way they do it that appeals to me? And how can I play around with that? So Sketchnote Army,
So,
check that
well,
out.
another thing is, let's say people are used to taking their handwritten notes. What kind of sketches could they make kind of in the margins of handwritten notes that they already do? What kind of sketches could they put together that would be the most impactful? Like what I like to do is create like mini mind maps where if there's like a main idea and three subpoints, I'll draw out a little like mind map just to get that idea kind of solidified. So are there things like that that you can do if you don't want to immediately jump into like a full sketch note type thing?
Absolutely.
You just do it on paper.
So the Sketchnote Handbook by Mike Rohde is an excellent thing to check out. It talks about, well,
Okay.
you start off with maybe, you play around a little bit of typography or lettering. You make some things bolder. You make some, or you draw boxes around stuff. So you have containers here, right? Or you add arrows and dividers, and that already helps you start structuring it. Then you can play around with adding a couple of icons, or different kinds of bullets. So instead of using a just a dot for a bullet, maybe you'll use a check mark to show that it's something that you need to do. These are all different ways that you can start off with basic handwritten notes and then start making it a little bit more visual, a little bit more engaging.
And
But a
another
serious
thing that I
sorry.
think is really important is when you're working on your business or you're working on a project, actually mapping it out in a visual format.
Oh,
Could you
absolutely.
talk about how useful that is and the different, I mean, you're into outsourcing, so I'm sure you use these visuals to show the different freelancers you have working for you. So can you talk about how they make life easier, improve your understanding, improve your thinking, improve your communication, and making, because one of the things about outsourcing is just helping the other person understand what you want them to do, and that can be a big friction point.
Mm-hmm. Well, I really like the lean canvas idea of having everything put together in one page, right? So,
Okay.
brainstorm the whole bunch of different lean canvases for the different kinds of business ideas that I might want to explore. Here's one for digital conference or event sketch notes, where you have, the problem, the solution, your unique value proposition, all those good things that you want to keep in mind, right there. And as you can see, it's a very simple combination of mostly text, but a couple of icons or emoticons or rather images just to make it more fun for me. So I have things like this and I share them. I share my process as well. I really like writing down step-by-step instructions for how I do things. It helps me remember things and it helps other people learn how I do things as well. And that's worked out really well so far. I've been experimenting with delegation for a while, and I really really like the way that it helps me get rid of things that I used to worry about or stress out about, like scheduling. And it also helps me, work with people's amazing talents and skills. So
Mhm.
big fan of it. Definitely give it a try.
What if somebody wants to, for example, have somebody help them with scheduling? Um, how could they easily get into that, and how much would it cost them?
Oh, hey, I actually have a blog post about this. Hang on a second. Let me bring up my scheduling. Uh, do, 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 do. Uh, so I have a virtual assistant. I have several actually, but the person who handles the scheduling, like for example, when we set up this call today, she is based in the Philippines, works for something like $5 an hour, and it usually takes her. Yeah, she works on an as-needed basis. So whenever I send her mail, stuff happens, which is great. And the way that it works is I gave her access to my calendar. I set her up with email, and it costs me maybe $2 a week to get my things scheduled, and I don't
Wow.
have to worry about the back and forth, and I don't have to worry about accidentally double booking myself or messing around with time zones, or things like making sure that people have backup phone numbers, which is awesome. Because sometimes if I'm running late or something comes up, I have to be able to call people. So it's actually not that scary and not that expensive. And I've included my so actually let's pick the online meeting ones as an example. I've included my process for scheduling.
Yeah.
Plus, I think one of my blog posts even has the job posts that I've used to hire people. So it's a very very easy thing to get into and try out.
Now, one of the really interesting things about you is how prolific you are in blogging every single day and sharing so much of what you're learning. And I think it's such a valuable exercise because I think if you don't express an idea that you learn and you just kind of consume it, it doesn't stick long term and it doesn't get used. And you have I'm curious if you could talk about what motivates you to do that, and also the benefits that come out of it, because you've got some really great commenters on your blog. And I can tell that you're just learning a lot and connecting a lot with other people through that process. And I hope that can inspire some of the people listening to start blogging and also understand that just by reading other people's blogs, commenting, and having your own blog and sharing on it, you can learn a lot from other people by connecting with other people, and also the process of getting those ideas down on paper or into a blog post.
So blogging turned out to be an amazing thing. I started blogging in 2001. Basically, I was taking notes on my computer, and I was working with this software program, Planner Mode for Emacs, and I wanted to build blogging capabilities into it. So I was using to take notes from class, from the things that I was learning, and I realized that this was a great way to remember things because if I wasn't trying to explain it to myself or to other people, it would just disappear. I have a hard time remembering what I did last week, much less what I learned a month ago. So having that kind of record really helped. And I started really posting a lot. I wrote about the things that I was trying to teach when I was teaching computer science. I wrote about getting ready for an internship in Japan. I wrote about my master's degree. True story, I had such a hard time writing my thesis, so what I did was I drafted parts of it on my blog, and then I translated it from friendly blog writing English to academic-ese. So that really helped. And it's just been a fantastic way for me to remember and to share and also even at the beginning to think things through and to understand.
Can you tell us a story about like somebody that you met through blogging?
Oh, it's really hard. There's a lot of stories. It's at this point, I have people who have been commenting on my blog for years and years and years, and it's fantastic because I would be much too shy to email people in the first place. People always
Yeah.
say, the money's in the mailing list, but I'm like, oh, I don't. Do I really want to take up one line in people's inboxes? The blog is great because people can voluntarily read it. They read it when they want to. They choose whether or not to follow, and how frequently they want to hear from me. And so when I write about stuff, and people respond, maybe they give me advice in starting a business, or they cheer me on as I'm learning how to draw, or trying out all these different things. It's you get to learn from so many more people out there, and you get to do that without feeling like you're imposing on them, or or you're in their face or whatever else. So if you're shy about blogging and all that, I find it really helps to remember that you don't have to be an expert, that yes, other people know more than you, and this is a good thing, and it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to, write about the things that you're learning, knowing that you could be wrong, because you learn so much in the process.
Now, one of the things that you talked about in one of your blog posts, but I wanted to learn more, is you use your blog to actually do spaced repetitions on the different things that you've learned on a weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. So could you talk about first of all, do you do that using the printouts that you do of your blog, or do you do it looking at the computer screen? And then what does your schedule look like for reviewing things, and how do you keep it all organized when you have
Okay.
so much stuff?
So I picked up the idea of a weekly review from David Allen's Getting Things Done, which is an excellent book and which probably everyone has read at this point. Anyway, so Getting Things Done talks about every week you think about what you've accomplished or what you've done, and you check that you check on things that might have fallen through the cracks, and you plan ahead so you get a sense of what the key priorities are. And I've been doing these weekly reviews for years and years now at this point as well. So the way that the weekly reviews have evolved for me is I use it to just very quickly list down the blog posts that I posted during the week, so get the titles in there, help me remember. Um, and then I also have it automatically look at my time, how I spent my time, and the things that I checked off my task list, which is actually super awesome when you tie those things together. So I do this every week. I do this pretty much every Saturday now, and it's a great way for me to just remember what I did. Every month or so, I also roll that up into a larger, hey, what did I learn this month? Or what did I do this month? And what are some things that I want to see in the next month? So, for example, in June here, I said, oh, I've been experimenting with virtual meetups. This was how I used my time. And these were all the blog posts that I had. And I categorized it into, well, different categories. So then I can see where I've been spending more time writing. And also think about, oh, what do I want to learn about next? And I roll this up into yearly reviews. If you work at a company that does annual performance reviews, having notes like this is excellent, because then you can say, oh, I did all of this wonderful cool stuff. But even for yourself personally, it's nice to know where that time went, what you did with your life. So this is all goodness. And then in addition to doing this, since I already categorized a blog post like this, I've also been working on keeping a categorical index of my blog, just because there's so many posts now. This one just covers posts since 2007, and as you can see, there are a lot of different categories that just have all these different posts underneath them.
Yeah. So okay, so you've got that, but how do you actually do the spaced repetitions?
I actually don't worry about it too much. Basically, if something is useful for me to remember, probably I'll end up searching my blog for it again at some point, in which case I go and try to make it more findable if it took long time to find it. I
Okay.
rely on people commenting on really old posts to help me remember what I've completely forgotten writing about. This is great, because I
Oh,
think
that's funny.
there was one post there that had some like maybe more than 8 years between the time it was posted and the time somebody commented on it. But it's amazing what people come across in search engines, right? And then in WordPress, I also have things like related posts. Oh, sometimes this nudges me to check things out, or things like on this day, and then I can go back and I can look at, well, oh yeah, these are the kinds of things that I was working on, and I got inspiration from those 10-year gardening journals, or 10-year journals where you're just making one entry, but all the entries for that day throughout the 10 years are on the same page. So you get that sense
Wow.
of, oh yeah, actually, we've come a long way.
So one of the questions we got earlier and we didn't finish talking about is your semi-retirement.
Ah,
You worked
yes.
at IBM and then you went off, and I, I don't fully understand what happened, but I'm really curious to hear your story about that.
Okay, so and there's quite a story about it. I've been so basically I've been saving up in an opportunity fund ever since I started working, because it's always nice to be able to say, oh, there's an interesting idea here, or I want to try this gadget out, or I wanted to play around with this. So opportunity funds, great idea. If set aside some money so you can guiltlessly learn about stuff. And then I was looking at the kinds of things
How
that I
much
wanted.
how do you decide how much money to put into that fund?
I think it really depends on what you can set aside. I started off with the initial personal finance recommendations of, oh, you should be saving 10 to 20% for the long term, and I figured another 10% for this opportunity fund, so it was just regularly coming out of my savings. And
Okay.
then when I looked back, it turned out I'd actually saved in the order of like 60 to 70% of my income throughout the time that I was working. So it's like, oh, hey, there's a fair bit of resources here that I can use to do stuff. So that was
Yeah.
part of it, having the resources to do that. The second part of it was taking a look at how I spent my time and what I wanted to learn. I made a list of the different things that I wanted to dig into, and I realized that if I saved it for just for whatchamacallit, for evenings and weekends, I could learn some things. But you know what? There's it'll take longer to get to everything that I wanted. And I realized also that because both my husband and I are very frugal, and I've got this opportunity fund set aside, and I could keep tinkering around with my wants and desires. It turned out, for example, that I don't actually need to go to the movie theater that often, and I don't buy a lot of things. So I decided, um, to be really cool for learning things that maybe other people don't have the chance to, is what if I take the Sagmeister idea of having a sabbatical. He takes a sabbatical every 7 years, 1 year off, 7 years on. or 6 or 7 years of working and another year off, and he
Okay.
finds it to be very creatively recharging. But what if I take that and I take the idea of, um, I think Tim Ferriss or somebody else said, moving some of your retirement earlier, and I said, okay, if I block off enough time, say 5 years. 5 years apparently is how long most businesses need to get established, or a large majority of businesses fail within the first 5 years. So if you can make it past that point, you're doing pretty well. If I can save up enough money to not worry about my income or expenses for 5 years, imagine what kinds of questions I can explore. Imagine what kinds of things I can learn, because the risk is not there, right? You can deal with the risk early. And so I saved up. And when I reached when I reached a nice point, and I was reasonably confident that I wasn't going to waste all that time just goofing around, I struck off on my own, wrapped up my projects nicely because it's always nice to turn over things well and not burn any bridges. But then I was like, all right, let's go on with my experiment. Let's try it out, especially since most people don't have the time or space or perhaps discipline or inclination to do this kind of, what can you do if you don't have to worry about income for 5 years? I wanted to find out. So here I am.
So, okay, so let me get this. So first of all, it seems like you have to have a lot of confidence to say, oh, well, I'm just going to take all this time off, and then I'm going to be able to get a job uh, when I need money again. So was your plan that you were going to figure out a way to start a business so that you would be able to eventually stay in retirement? Or, I mean, what was your thinking there? Because I don't get the whole transition. That's really scary for people. They're
Oh yeah,
thinking, well,
totally.
I couldn't just quit my job and,
It was
you
very scary
know,
for me too. So basically, the structure of the 5-year experiment is I am going to be completely unhireable for 5 years, and so or if something happens, I can always change my mind. But most, if things go well, I'll be completely unhireable for 5 years, and then after 5 years, I'm going to evaluate whether I want to return to a corporate job, which I actually really enjoyed. I had a lot of fun at IBM doing web development and technology evangelism, or if I decide to do other things. So one of the things that I did to help to get into this was imagine all these different ways that it could fail. For example, if it turns out that at the end of 5 years I don't have marketable skills and I don't have a strong network, then I'll have a hard time getting back into the groove of things. That's something I have to watch out for. But I can mitigate all those risks. I mean, I can, for example, if it turns out that at the end of 5 years, this really isn't my kind of thing, and I want to go back to work, I feel reasonably confident that because I can learn quickly and I'm keeping my technical skills sharp or whatever else.
but most people
Yeah.
would say 5 years is like a really long time. Like, why didn't you pick like 1 year or 6 months or something like that?
Mainly because I could, and also because you also don't want to run back into safety too quickly. It
Okay.
based on
Where did
this.
you get the inspiration for this idea? Because I mean, this is very radical.
Here and there, as I mentioned, Segmeister's sabbaticals, this idea of shifting some of your, retirement earlier, and you come across things like Early Retirement Extreme or Mr. Money Mustache, which talk about, hey, you know what, if you radically reduce your expenses or you keep a very simple lifestyle, and then you save the rest, right? Let's say, for example, if you can save 75% of your income, then every year that you work, you free yourself up for 3 more years. So, all these little things.
It sounds kind of like Thoreau's. Do you know Thoreau's quote on that?
He's probably said many, many good things about being independent.
Yeah.
So worth an experiment, right? Worth trying out, worth seeing what can happen. And sure, it's a risk. Worst case scenario, I come out of this, I don't have a good story. But you know what? The human brain is amazing at rationalization and pattern making. So chances are, at the end of the 5 years, I'll be able to come up with a coherent story for how everything fits together, and then either convince people to let me stay in business or convince people to give me a job or whatever, right? Or it might turn out that 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 I might even be like actually retired. So who knows how it'll all work out.
So one of the one of the things I wanted to do is go through some of your hobbies like cooking and gardening and ask you, for example, how is learning like cooking? Or how is your process for learning like cooking? Or sketch noting? How is putting together a sketch note like cooking?
The funny thing is that all these different hobbies have very similar skills, and so they really build on each other. Let me bring up a diagram that I made of this some time ago. You find yourself doing, let's say for example, okay,
Oh, somebody asked in the questions what game you were using on the Nintendo DS to do the drawings.
oh, it's called Colors DS. You can install it in a homebrew chip like the R4DS, and it's free. So it wasn't a game at all. It's just some app that somebody had put together and shared. Oh yes, so hobbies, right? For example, writing and programming and presenting and presenting is a hobby, and experimenting, they all feed into each other. So and the same goes with a lot of my other things, like quantified self or tracking and measuring my life so I can make better decisions. That's kind of related to writing. And then I use sketch notes to make it, easier for me to understand things and for other people to understand what I'm learning about life based on this data. So it kind of all blends together. Which also means that it's very easy for me to add new interests because the new interests have a lot of things in common with what I'm already doing.
And what would you say are some of those similarities that are the most powerful?
It goes back to this idea of to this three-word philosophy that I figured out for myself, which is learning and sharing and scaling. With all these different interests, I'm really interested in learning as much as I can and then sharing it with other people because A, I can save them time, and B, I learn so much in the process. And then the scale comes from either learning how to do things more efficiently, like with cooking and bulk cooking and filling up our freezer with all these different things that we can just pull out whenever we need to go to work and have lunch. So there's that, right? So there's scaling up in terms of economies of scale, and there's also scaling up in terms of how can I share things so that other people can learn from this without my necessarily having to teach them one-on-one. So there's, I find this learn, share, scale thing, or even things like the lean startup idea of a build, measure, the learn sort of thing.
Yeah.
That reoccurs in all of these different interests, and the better that I get at that, and the better I get at core skills like making decisions or understanding things or learning, the better everything gets.
So like when you say getting better at understanding things, what does that mean? Is that like, well, drawing stuff out helps me understand it better, or is it something deeper than that?
Oh, funny you should ask, because I actually have a skill breakdown here. I was thinking about what learning means, and let me break it out of my skill. Learning. Okay.
And this is EMAC that's showing up on the screen,
Yes.
black code.
Yes, code. So for me, the skills that the general skills that I've been working on in terms of learning are even identifying what it is that you want to learn in the first place, and then breaking it down so that you can learn about it in manageable chunks, and prioritizing it so you pick something that engages you or gives you a lot of value right away, or other people really like as well. Getting ready to learn, actually doing the learning, remembering what you learn, because this is completely different from learning. You can learn things and you forget them. That doesn't really help. Applying that in both similar and very different contexts, and then sharing it. So all these different things that are packed up into learning that are so much fun to explore.
What are some of your hacks for figuring out what are the best resources to learn from? Because I think that if you just have the best resources to learn from, that can replace so much stuff like speed reading or trying to get stuff from a lot of different sources. If you can find a few things that are just gold mines of information, it can speed things up so much.
Possibly. I do have the unfair advantage of actually being able to speed read. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just check out 15 different books from the library in the same topic and then read through practically all of them to see which ones I like the most. I can do that because I can burn through the books very quickly. But
Yeah.
it all comes down to what understanding how you learn and how you can learn well. So for example, if I want to learn more about a topic, I might dig through the books. I'll look at the what the library has in its collections. I might look at the Amazon ratings for different books to see what people really liked. I might click around to see what blog posts and what resources people refer to are out there. And also what's really interesting there also is figuring out how you can learn from experience. So how can you set up small experiments to learn from so that you're not just learning from other people's experiences and insights, you're also testing to see whether they make sense to you. There's all
Okay,
these different
so
strategies.
can you give us an example of that?
Like this huge experiment of taking 5 years off work to play around with how wonderful it can be, right? You read about it in other people's stories. Is oh, what would they do if they had this financial freedom or independence or whatever, or you look at how people are learning from startups. But there's also actually going and doing things, and then things like drawing, for example. I could read all the books that I want on how to draw faces or figures, but I'm starting to find things that I want to learn that I can't find books about, which is tremendously frustrating because I'd rather, do the shortcut and learn from other
Like
people's
what?
mistakes. like how do you express all these abstract concepts that I come across in terms of technology or business or whatever? We don't really have a visual thesaurus that's geared towards this. I think someone's actually working on that in Germany, but anyway, I don't have a visual thesaurus, so I have to build my own. And so what I do is I look at a combination of breaking down how other people are drawing things, as well as coming up with my own images and examples for this. And I stick all of that into Evernote just so it's easy to search. But
So
there's so
what
much.
does that mean, a visual thesaurus?
Okay, so for example, if I want to draw, what's the danger? Uh, what are some different ways that you can draw danger? You can draw danger as an alarm. You can draw danger as, this stress sort of thing. You can draw it as radiation. I've got this, and then this is one of my experiments where I sat down and I thought about these different ways that you can express danger. Uh, and
Oh,
it's a combination of learning from what's already out there and then playing around with the concept to see what you can learn on your own too.
it reminds me of these icon sets that you can get for your website.
Mm-hmm.
So you must study those a lot.
Every so often. So iStock Photo and other stock photography websites are actually pretty interesting sources for, just how would people express this, or what are some visual metaphors, and what do all these different emotions look like. But you also find that a lot of people, the they stick to the same basic ways of explaining things, which is actually a good thing because if it's something that's common, then other people will understand it quickly. I mean, some of these things maybe people don't really understand why it's dangerous. Like this one over here doesn't really look like someone getting electrocuted. But yes, there's so much inspiration out there.
And one of the other things that I think is so powerful with visuals is that in communicating, your communication is going to be most clear and most powerful if you can communicate an image that, or something that evokes an image in the other person's head. And I
Hmm.
think the metaphors, the visual metaphors, also make you a more creative person. And when you translate that into business, that means that you're going to be more innovative. You're going to be able to stay ahead of your competition. And I'm wondering if you've noticed if there's certain things as you got better with drawing or with some of your other creative pursuits, uh, dancing is another example. How did that, if at all, did it affect your feeling of how creative you are, or things that you've done to become more creative?
This is kind of an odd thing because I'm not really sure Um, I've always had fun making things. Programming is an example. I've been programming since I think I was 6 or something of the sort, and that to me is just as creative and just as fascinating as drawing. Although drawing is much easier for other people to look at and go, "Ooh, that's cool." So certainly, creativity is something that has many forms, and I think people who tell themselves that they're not very creative do themselves such a great disservice. I've stopped worrying about whether I'm creative or not, or whether these things help me increase my creativity or whatever. I just have fun with it, and I just keep asking, oh, what would make this better? What would make this more wonderful? Drawing helps, sure, because then I can express things to people who might not have the patience to read a blog post, and the book reviews and all of that stuff help me connect with other people. But there's there's so much in terms of things that you do that you can look at and you can say this is creative, that you shouldn't limit it to just saying, oh, drawing is creative, I don't draw, therefore I'm not creative. And then there are always ways that you can keep expanding your brain's ability to think laterally, or to come up with interesting ideas, or to look at existing things in a different way.
Well, one example that I think is things like learning how to dance or gardening. You've got to, I mean, for me, learning how to dance, like I I played sports, but dancing is such a different kind of skill than different intellectual skills like learning business or learning about different subjects. And it really was humbling, and it really brought me back to square one. And I got frustrated a lot with it, and I felt like I wasn't getting better. And I noticed this sort of short-term mindset creeping up, and usually I'm not. I try to be a long-term thinker. And one of the things about starting the garden this spring was that with a garden, one of the people are always making jokes in internet marketing about how everybody wants the magic pill instant solution. But with a garden, there's no instant garden. You've got to like put the seed in, and you got to water it every day, and you can't forget to water it. And it's almost like having children, having plants, because they depend on you. And so it kind of forces you to take that long-term view. And I think just that distinction between short-term view and long-term view ends up being really important in learning, because if you're just focused on the short-term techniques and tricks and tips, you never get into the systems thinking. And that's something that that's one of your strengths, your key strengths.
Well, thank you. Actually, the thing that I like about gardening is that you do a little bit of stuff, but then things happen in the background without your input. So every time I look at the garden, I'm like, oh, look, there are new plants in there, which is fantastic. So it's kind of different. You plan your garden more, I guess. So
Is it
I
true
yeah.
that plants grow at night and not during the day?
I have no idea. Stuff just happens.
I heard about it. Yeah.
So, and then in terms of, well, dancing, what I liked about dancing was the same thing that I liked about presenting and interviewing and all of that. It's that give and take, and something fascinating happens, right? When
Mhm.
you're giving a presentation and you're dancing, you're listening with your entire body to the other person, and stuff happen, or the audience, and stuff comes out of it that you couldn't do in your own. So there are all these different things that these different experiences that these interests open you to. And for me, I guess, you know because the human brain is really good at drawing connections between stuff, being able to take a step back and say, oh yeah, my interest in this led to my interest in that, and this is the system, and this is how it all fits together. That's actually something your brain is really good at, rationalization. So systems think, take a step back and take that long-term perspective. And I find that even if I'm just exploring, if I'm following the butterflies of my interest, just going where my energy leads me from moment to moment, um, over the years, it actually works out really well. So I'm surprised that the things that I played around with, the Nintendo DS that I played around with in 2007 or something like that, turns out to have this kind of ongoing influence in my life. Uh, you
It's
don't
what,
have
yeah,
to,
that's one of the
yeah.
things. That's one of the things I noticed about your. I watched your quantified self presentation, And one of the other things that in studying geniuses is that they tend to, Albert Einstein was famous for taking his afternoon naps. And I remember in your quantified self thing, you were like bragging about how much sleep you get. And I'm the same way. I need 9 or 10 hours to really be at my best. And people are always saying, oh, you sleep too much and stuff. But I think that in terms of learning, if you're sleep deprived, I was sleep deprived probably every single day when I was in school, and it really hurt me, and it really takes a toll on how much you enjoy your life, I think.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
one of the other things you just mentioned was how you follow the butterflies of your interest. And I think a lot of people, first of all, I love that metaphor, but second of all, um, when you're following your curiosity in the moment, I think that puts you in a flow state where you're really maximizing the potential of your brain. And a lot of people try to force themselves to learn things, and they put deadlines on themselves and stuff like this. And I think it ends up stressing them out, and they don't enjoy learning, and so then they don't enjoy doing things like spaced repetition because they view it as something they have to do as opposed to something they want to do.
I think enjoyment is such a big part of it, whether it's sleep or having time for discretionary activities or spending time with people or whatever else. I, I I I suspect that one of the reasons why I enjoy learning so much is because I enjoy life in general so much, and so I'm not pushing myself to complete this by so and so date or do this or else or else I get fired or else I do this or whatever. So certainly having that kind of freedom and curiosity will make a big difference. And then the other thing that people are worried about is whether that leads to a lack of commitment, or whether they're going to be dispersed or distracted, a dilettante of with too many interests and not being able to get really deeply into one. But the funny thing is that things tend to come together. So, for example, my interest in drawing turns up in my consulting, and I start doing a little bit of that at work too, or whatever else. It's everything turns out to be useful is if you look for those connections. So,
Yeah, and that's another one of the patterns in studying geniuses is that they tend to see the similarities or the resemblances between different things, and that's why metaphors are so important because um, they're kind of representations of the similarity between two different things. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about to kind of wrap up is, what do you think? I think the future of learning is really going to go more into this visual format in terms of putting things in mind maps and flow charts and diagrams and drawings because it instantly clicks for people and it makes sense. And so I think there's a huge opportunity in there, and I'm wondering what your opinion is on, and even kind of from a business angle as well, where do you see the future of the industry in terms of sketchnoting, but where do you see it expanding, and how do you think it's going to impact the next 5 or 10 years of how people learn and, even books and stuff like that, people putting more drawings in books and
oh,
so.
I'm so excited about that. So it turns out that graphic recording and graphic facilitation, this drawing of what people talk about in meetings and presentations, has been a thing for decades. It's just been a well-kept secret. And as we get better and better at doing it and sharing it and inspiring other people, and as the tools also themselves progress, a lot of people are drawing on tablets where because they can erase things, they feel more confident. I know because I can erase things, I feel more confident about drawing when I wouldn't try it on paper. So the tools are getting there. That the ability to just share things online or even search for information within these images and share things that you find fascinating. That's contributing to it. Publishers are getting more used to this idea of adding cute little things in the books. So it's not just so for example, Head First has this entire series of technical books that have drawings and doodles and diagrams in them, and you have books coming out as comic books or whatever. Back in high school and university, my mom used to get us these cartoon guide to physics and cartoon guide to history and all of that. But we're seeing that go into more and more um, books outside, so
Uh,
books and technology. So this is great. Excellent trend. I'm definitely looking forward to what people do with it. But the most important thing for me is that people know that they can do this themselves. That it's not just
yeah.
for somebody else to, to draw things. Oh, that's fantastic. Or the books to, to be more interesting because they have pictures in it. But they can use this as a technique to help themselves learn and to help people make sense of life. So give it a try, and things will just get even better.
The last thing I want to mention is we didn't talk too much about connecting, but you have a great presentation called "How to Connect as an Introvert,"
Oh
and
yeah, the shy connector.
one of the things I was a few years ago, I stumbled upon this handwriting analysis thing, and you said that um, you were an introvert, and sometimes introverts feel like they have to pretend to be an extrovert in order to connect with people. And so I kind of forgot what the actual patterns of handwriting analysis are. So I looked it up last night because you have your signature. You have your signature on every note. So I did a little analysis of it, and the analysis of it actually says that you're somewhere between an introvert and an extrovert because you've got these large loops in the letters, and whereas an introvert will write their letters very up and down, somebody who's more extroverted is more expressive, and so they tend to slant their letters to the side. And I noticed that in your signature, so I just want to let you know that you might have an extrovert inside you that's trying to get out and is expressing itself in your handwriting.
So this is a variant of you can't possibly be an introvert because you give lots of presentations, you have all these like people on LinkedIn or you blog. Holy cow, you blog. Um, uh, and the funny thing is that basically intense social interaction like conferences or whatever totally wiped me out. I will sleep for 14 hours after a conference, and
Yeah.
it's not just a matter of staying up late because I looked at the time. It wasn't just that. Some people get a lot of energy out of talking to people. I like recharging, and I recharge by being quiet and reading and writing and all of that. But the funny thing is I've found all these different hacks that help me connect with people on my terms and on their terms. So it's not that I need to pretend to be an extrovert, and I actually don't go to events all that often. And I've got a blog post coming up about this. I actually have to geekily figure out how to give parties. Um, but it's true because it's a party thing still worth thinking about.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah, it's okay to be an introvert is what I want to say, and it's not that I'm secretly an extrovert and all that. I know that I will get drained by intense social interaction. But the funny thing is that there are all these different ways around it. So, for example, sketchnoting or blogging or all these other ways for me to connect with people, give them something of value, so I don't feel guilty about taking up their time, and learn so much from them as well without necessarily imposing and saying, no, you got to teach me, all this stuff. You specifically need to tell me at this time. It's kind of weird. But if it's a blog comment and I ask questions and people respond, it's fantastic. So it works for me. If you're an introvert, find ways to hack around it, and you can find that it's totally all right to be an introvert.
well, Sasha, it was great talking to you today. Can you give people uh, your website and how they can find out more about you? And we'll also put some links in the comments here so you can get to her website and some of the stuff she talked about today.
For sure. Since my name is somewhat hard to spell, you can also get to my website at livinganawesomelife.com. So that's living an awesome life, like it is. And you can also find me on Twitter at Sasha C, which is Sierra Alpha Charlie Hotel Alpha Charlie. And you'll probably want to look up the show notes or the YouTube video for that one. SACHAC. Anyway, so there, living an awesome life. I'd look forward to hearing from you. Let's get the conversation going.